Thank you, everyone, for joining once again to the Pranic World Festival, another day of talks, sharing of information, inspiration, joy. I know that it's been an amazing time for me here so far. And just to see everyone's faces each day, new faces joining, saying goodbye to some, saying hello to others, it's been quite a joy for me this year. So as I was mentioning, today's talk is going to be in English. So please, for those of you joining online, you will want to go down to the bottom of the screen and hit the world symbol if you need translation. For those of you here in person, we again ask that please, if you can turn your video off of your screen so that we can save the bandwidth for our whole group here. So this morning, it's a bit of we have a bit of a surprise for you. I'm going to play double role right now. I'm presenting myself. So, oh, so kind. And I know that on our program it said Ivan, but Ivan isn't able to be with us today. So it has been deemed that it is time for me to make my first public talk about pranic living. So now I'm going to set this microphone down. And sit here. Test, 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 test. Test. Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for that warm welcome. I feel blessed. I feel blessed already to be here in general, but to be here now speaking feels like another moment for me where on my path, something is being pushed forward without me asking for it. So I'm here to serve and be of service. And this is another moment where I'm being asked to step forward. So thank you for the warm welcome. It's my first time speaking publicly since I've been on this journey. And it's funny, I'm playing two roles right now. I'm reminding myself to speak slowly for the translators. So I think what I'm going to, I'm speaking just from the heart, not from my mind right now. I didn't prepare anything, although I do feel ready to speak openly and to share my journey. So I think now what I'll be doing is just speaking about my journey so far, about my journey in pranic living. So for me, this has really been a process of surrender. Surrendering what I thought my life was going to be like, and what my life truly is meant to be. And so there's many ways in which that's happened for me. We know that saying that when you make plans, God laughs. I've learned that one over and over. So I'm now going to adjust this. Oh, that's much better. So I'm now, this is an experiment in autonomous living, I think. I introduce myself and then I speak and I adjust things for myself. So my journey in pranic living began in 2016. So it's been a number of years. that I've been experimenting with this lifestyle. And the first thing that really happened for me was prior to 2016 was I had seen a video once. It was about a 2-minute clip of a woman speaking about having done some kind of, she said, an initiation, and where now she didn't need to eat. She just ate like every couple of days. And other than that, she was free. And she said it was so much nicer for her to live that way. And something in me immediately went, yes, that's for me. I felt it deeply right away. And then I just kind of went on with my life as normal. And some years later, I tried to find that video, but it's gone. Slow down. Slower, speak more slowly for the interpreters. Yeah, so during that moment, I think this is a moment where probably everyone here, something in you is curious. Something in you says, oh, I want to know more. So I really had that very strongly for myself watching that video. In 2016, I had already gone through a period of time where I had decided, due to being very unhappy in my life, I had already quit my life, so to speak. I had left the relationship I was in. At the time, I was a professional photographer, and I was flying around the world, and I had a beautiful relationship, so to speak. Everyone constantly told me, you're living the dream. But something in me said, if I have it all, if this is the dream, then why am I so unhappy? And something in me wanted to know more. And I had already surrendered to letting go of that life. And I knew that I was going to have a bumpy ride, and I did. I went through a deep depression and felt very lost. But this searching feeling I had within me didn't stop, didn't let go of me. And there's something in me that's always optimistic as well. Even though I felt sad and depressed, there's always something in me that is finding the joy, finding the beauty, finding the reason why being a human being is something to cherish. So I found myself experimenting since I was quite young. I would say this thing within me that was searching was always there. So I remember being a young child and my mother forcing me to eat, and I didn't want to. I remember sitting at the table. I'm sure some of you had this kind of scenario where you had to stay there until all the food on your plate was done. But I would just sit there for hours. My desire to not consume that was so much stronger than even the will of my mother, because finally she would just break and go play. Because all my brothers were outside playing and I was just sitting at the table staring at this plate of food. I did enjoy eating some things, but often I was not wanting to to eat. I just wanted to be outside. I was more curious about frogs than I was about food. So there's another story that my mom tells about me, that we went on this trip in the car. So I was born in the US and in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle. And so there's a journey we were taking from Spokane to Seattle, which is several hours. And my mom gave me a sandwich at the beginning of that journey. She said, eat it. And so my other trick was that I would put it in my mouth and chew, but I would squirrel it in my cheeks and not swallow. So I remember this happening, and we laugh now at this story because 3 hours later, I fell asleep in the back of the car, and my mom found me with the sandwich in my cheeks. So I got to spit it out. She didn't make me swallow that one. So there was something in me that already felt that food wasn't something that I really wanted. I'm not really so curious about food. I do enjoy taste, and I do enjoy the sensual pleasure of food, but I am more curious about other things with my attention and my energy. But throughout my life, I did make steps that were more about my health than about my interest in food. So it was more a progression of letting go of things. So even as a teenager, I started to be conscious of the food that we were taking in a typical Western diet. I didn't feel good. So I started to cut out processed foods when I was a teenager. So my family would go to the mall and then to a fast food place after. And this was our family time on the weekend. So there was a point at which we would go for lunch after, and I just stopped. I just started taking nothing. My family's like, what do you want? And I would say, no, I'm good. And then they started to not know what to do with me. Like, what are we going to feed her? Is this energy again a bit? But I also did eat some of that kind of food. I'm not saying I rejected it all. I'm just saying I remember these moments where it came in my consciousness and I started to make these choices. And then right away from leaving home, I became vegetarian. So in my late teens, early 20s, I was vegetarian since then. And then years later, I easily went to a vegan diet. And then raw vegan, I became curious about that and experimented with that as well. But during this time, I was never dogmatic about anything. I was never rigidly saying, this is the way I should be. I was just experimenting with myself and following my own intuition. So, for instance, when I was pregnant with my son, I was mostly vegan, but my body, when I was shopping, went and took some salmon, and I hadn't eaten meat for years, but my body told me to eat that, so I did. And I've just been really following my inner guidance with everything. So back to this time, 2016, I had already for years been experimenting with all sorts of ways of what I was putting in and seeing the effects of what I was putting into my body. And I really felt like I was wanting to do what I thought at that time was fasting. So I didn't have the ability to do an extended fast, but that's what I wanted. And so I had the excuse that my life wouldn't allow me to do that. I was too busy. I had too much work. I was a mother and my life was very busy. So I had the feeling that I couldn't do an extended fast. Really, it was an excuse. But then that excuse, I realized, was an excuse for everything. And so that's when I quit that life. And I'll say I didn't quit it in the most gracious way. I made a lot of mistakes. And but I was doing the best I could. And I found myself surrendering to not knowing what was going to come next after the dream life supposedly that I had. I chose to really listen to this subtle voice inside myself. And I had a lot of fear, but also a real knowing, a real trust. So this voice inside me said, you're going to Rarotonga. I had to Google, what's Rarotonga? What is this? Where am I going? And I found out that it's a small island in the South Pacific. I had never been there before. I didn't know where it was or what it was. So Google told me. And I arrived there. Well, prior to that, when we surrender to a higher purpose, when we surrender to our authentic path, the universe really does step in and align everything for us and takes care. And so the path unfolded before me. And at the time, I was also doing some healing work. So I also do healing work. I've studied with Aboriginal elders in Canada and also from Australia. And so I was doing a session for someone. And when I arrived to the space that I was doing this session at, a woman opened the door to the house. And we looked at each other. And probably like that happens at a festival like this, you see people and you recognize them. But out in the world and everyday life, it's more rare, perhaps. But we recognized each other. And after I completed the session, she said, we just began to speak. And she said, well, what kind of work are you doing? I explained the kind of healing work that I was doing. And she said, okay, well, I would like to work with you. And I said, okay, but I'm only going to be here until the end of September. And she said, oh, okay. I said, I'm in a big life transition and I'm trusting and I'm moving without knowing exactly where or how it's going to unfold. And she said, oh, well, where are you going? And I said, Rarotonga. And she said, wow, no way. I live there. I had never known what that place was before. I'd never heard of it. And 2 weeks later, when I trusted and I accepted that that's what was happening, I met someone from there. And she said, when are you going to be there? And I said, the beginning of October. And she said, I'll be back there at the beginning of October for my brother's wedding. You should come and stay with me. So that's what happened. Thank you, Loren. And so now I had a place to stay. And also, she called me a couple of weeks later and said, the photographer for my brother's wedding bailed on them. Can you photograph their wedding? And I said, I guess I'm bringing my camera equipment with me. Yes, no problem. So then I had work lined up. This is how the universe works to support us when we trust. And while I was there, I did some healing work with some of the Indigenous elders there as well. So that might have been a part of higher service while I was there. But for my personal pranic journey, while I was there, I was introduced to some other people. And one woman said, I'm going back to New Zealand and we need somebody to house sit for us. Would you do that for a month? So I'm in paradise, swimming in the lagoon every day. I have work and I have a house to stay in for a month. And I said, wow, I have no more excuses. So I did my fast while I was there. I did 4 days dry. I didn't know what I was doing. In fact, I don't recommend this for anyone, but I did it solo and I didn't know much. I thought I was just fasting. But now I realize that I was doing my own initiation. I'm still doing my own introduction and initiation for myself. So I did 4 days of dry and then liquids. And I kind of intuitively knew that I was doing something that was challenging for my body. And so I asked my friend to come check on me every day to make sure I was still alive because I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And she said, oh, yes, of course, I'm going to come check on you. And she didn't quite know either, but she knew I was fasting. So I just enjoyed the tropical sun and going in the ocean each day and being quiet with myself. And during that time, I had an experience where my clarity and my trust deepened. And I had this, I had communication from this being that appeared to me and said that I got the name Babaji. And I had to use Google again. Who the heck is Babaji? So, and this, what I perceived as an external voice, as the voice of Babaji saying to me, now you need to go study with Leonard Orr. And I again, Google's my friend. Who's Leonard Orr? And so he's a breathwork facilitator in the US. He's kind of considered the grandfather of breathwork in the West. And so I spent, while my time in the South Pacific was ending, I went and did a month immersion with him in person, doing practices, daily spiritual purification practices with all the elements. We did fire ceremony every day. We did water breath work every day. And I practiced fasting while I was there too, what I was calling fasting. And now looking back, I realized that I did my own Breatharian initiation and I was just following my intuition and decreasing my input. So I did this month-long immersion and I've been graced. Thank you to all of my mentors and teachers. Leonard, I love you. Bless you. I know you're listening. He's moved on. He's transitioned to the other side. That was when I first started hearing him talk about physical immortality and these yogis that were hundreds of years old. And of course, I was curious. But again, I kind of felt like, oh, that's for, I started hearing more about this breatharian lifestyle and these concepts that I felt were still over there somewhere in the Himalayas or for yogis or for somebody else. And I still felt I'm just fasting. I'm just doing a health thing for myself. And then I continued on trusting and flowing with life. And I developed new work for myself, which was becoming a doula and teaching women about birthing using the breath and using the consciousness to bring us work with the hormones of the body and bring us into an ecstatic state instead of into a state of suffering. So it's very similar to what I was doing with myself in general. I'm losing track of time, so I just want to check. Mateo, can you tell me what time we have? Okay, perfect. Great. Slow down. Thank you to my beautiful partner for translating me into French, and he's telling me to slow down. So yes, up until this moment, I felt I was just doing health practices for myself. And although I had always been, I don't know, we use words in very loose ways, so I'll just use the words that are coming to me. I felt like I was always on a spiritual path. And a path of surrender. And I knew I was on a path of humility and keeping myself through experiences that I had that were fumbling moments in my life where I was making a mess of things. I had to choose to become really humble and either go even further into what we might call my ego and be more rigid, or to go, actually, I need to go become more soft and really admit that I don't know what I'm doing. And to surrender to not trying to design my life from what I thought were good ideas, but to really allow myself to soften into a different kind of presence with myself. And really, I think that that's what the pranic path has been about for me. And it's really been a spiritual journey for me. And I was working with Indigenous elders in Canada when I was in my early 20s. So my friends were going off to university and they knew the path that they wanted to take, what career that they wanted to have. And I felt very lost. This is a continuous theme in my life of not knowing. And not knowing left me open to other possibilities that were beyond what my mind could think up as a good idea or a good option for myself for designing my life. So I was really interested in herbal medicines, traditional uses of plants. My background is my family is indigenous from the US on my father's side. And this, I think, was an influence for me. So while my friends were going off and partying and having a good time and going to university, I found a mentor for myself. And I spent my time out in the forest with him. So I had a friend who was an herbalist, and I said I had this interest. And he said, "Oh, there's an elder that you should meet. I feel you're supposed to meet him. But good luck, because he's really hard to get a hold of." And so I knew where he lived, in what village he lived in the mountains. And I called the band office, which is like the local council office for the nation. It's called First Nations in Canada. So for that nation, that tribe, they have a council office. So I just called and I said, I'm looking for a man that lives in your village who knows about the plants. And they said, "Oh, yeah, well, you're in luck, because actually he's in the office right now," which is normally not the case. So something guiding me when to call. And he gets on the phone and he says, "Yeah, yeah, okay. When can you be here?" He has this way of speaking. And I said, "Well, I can be there next weekend because I'm working during the week." He said, "Yep, okay, we meet here at this time." And so I had my first car I had ever owned. I drove up into the mountains and I arrived there. And I don't know what to expect. But I walk into this, it's called a welcome center. So they had the welcome totem like this. And so something in me, I thought, "Oh yeah, I'm welcome here." So there was only one man sitting there. So I assumed it was him. So I walked up and I said, "Hi, I'm Morgaine." And he said, "Hi, I'm Morgan." And I said, "Oh my goodness, okay." So my first mentor, we had the same name. And I really feel like I've been blessed with so many mentors. The same thing happened when I went to study with Leonard. I sent him a message and I said, "I'm getting the message that I'm supposed to come and learn from you. I know that your immersion of 1 month, it costs this much money, but this is how much I have. I've been traveling and I haven't been working. I've been trusting that I'm going to be taken care of in the way that I need, and money will come." And he said, "Yep, when can you get here? Sooner the better." So this has always been kind of the way that's unfolded for me. And I'm very grateful. But back with my first mentor, Morgaine, this was one of my first experiences learning about the way in which we relate to food, the way in which our bodies are programmed, and our culture helps this along. Our relationship with consuming things. We were out walking and he said, "Oh yeah, next weekend, strawberry time. Wild strawberries will be ready. I'm going to take you to the place where they're growing. And maybe we'll see a bear or two." So the next weekend, I was excited for that. And I said to him when he told me this, I said, good. I'm going to bring a huge bucket. Because my mindset is that from my mother's experience and everything, you gather as much as you can and you preserve it for the winter. You make jams, you You make preserves and you prepare for the winter. And so I said, oh, I'm going to bring a big bucket. And he said, no, you're going to bring a small bucket. And I said, no, I'm going to bring a huge bucket and I'm going to pick so much. I was so excited. And he said, no, you're going to bring a small bucket. So I was put in my place, like, okay, I'll bring a small bucket. And I was just really just agreeing with what he said because he was my mentor and he was telling me, no, you're going to do this. So I was trying to be honoring what he was saying. And it took me some time because I was young and my consciousness was still expanding and I was still learning. I still am. I'm still young and I'm still learning. But I realized later, I heard his voice saying, no, you're going to bring a small bucket. And it was my first lesson in my relationship with fear and lack and greed. And he said, no, it's not only you that enjoys these strawberries. It's also the deer. It's also the birds. It's also all the life here. And if you take too much, there's not enough for the rest. And I realized then what he meant by that later. And that was my first touch with my own relationship with a sense of greed that I had inside myself, a sense of wanting and taking and consuming and taking things for myself and making sure I had enough. And I would say that that's an ongoing learning. It's an ongoing process. When do we have enough? And what are our actual needs? And the relationship with something that I really enjoy, like the flavor of that wild strawberry. When is enough of that pleasure? Because I know even when something is so magnificent, so exquisite, when you've had that exquisite experience, it's complete. I just started thinking about sex and that orgasmic state, and then it's a completion. But there's a deeper pleasure that we can reach and a deeper state of bliss, one that doesn't follow these kinds of cycles, these kinds of peaks and valleys. And for me on a pranic journey, those peaks and valleys are less, it's more steady. And at first, when I was thinking about that, I was like, but I love ecstatic dance and I love having this peak experiences. We hear about this lately, peak experiences. But what I realized is that the baseline that we're talking about, where you have these peaks and valleys, peak experience, and then it goes away and you say goodbye to your friends and then you're lonely, or, whatever it might be, the loss of that. Since I've been on this spiritual journey, and especially with pranic living, that's leveled out more. So it's not this peak and drop. It's steady. The same with my physical energy levels. It's more steady and constant. And I thought, well, maybe that's going to be boring because there's an addiction to that sort of experiences, right? These kind of ecstatic experiences. But in fact, what happens is that baseline, there's no highs and lows or no levels, but that baseline shifts. And so that ecstatic experience suddenly can become, or gradually can become, a higher state. So you enter into that bliss state that a lot talk about. I don't claim to be in that, but I do claim that I've touched something that I is new and is evolving and growing within me over these years. So 2016, what is our time now? Thank you. 10 minutes? 20 minutes. Perfect. So fast forward, I began to hear more about this breatharian thing. This, what is it? What's going on? People are talking about it. And I remembered that video I had seen. And so it was coming closer to me, you know, the energy of it. I hear it popping up around me. And I begin to get curious and to investigate and find information, probably like many of you are doing right now, or maybe you've already had experiences and are on the journey. But I looked around at what was happening in this and who was on this journey. What is this about? So I started to take in information. And really, I was guided to Nicholas. There's so many amazing facilitators and approaches to what we would group into this experience of pranic living or breatharianism. And so there's not one way or one person that has the answers, but we find the people and the information and the way that we need for ourselves. And so, yeah, I did all my processes online with Nicholas. And I did many of them. So the first one I did, I don't even remember what year it was now. But it was really, I don't want to say easy, but it was very smooth for me because I had already done some initiation for myself already. And I had already, so that's on the physical level, and I had already had a lot of experimenting with my diet. So on a physical level, it was smooth. And on an emotional level, I had already surrendered a lot in my life to not knowing where my path would lead me or what would happen next. And so I was just enthusiastic and excited and felt like with everything else I had been doing in my life, this was another thing that fit perfectly for me. So, and also had the realization that, oh, I already did my own initiation. That's what I had been doing with that dry fast and that month long of liquids, and then continuing to experiment with that afterwards. So I did an online process, 21 days with Nicholas. And I was just so happy that I just kept going. So I did many online processes, and finally I've been training to facilitate as well. So I've been slowly moving in the direction of helping others and being of service. And so I know that the way that I did the process with Nicholas is very easy, in that it's not something that's really hard on the body. He has a different way of doing it than others. And so that process was really gentle and really matched the way that I was needing to move in my life, to move more into softness and surrender. And I know that in other ways in my life, I've done some things that were really fast and really intense. And I know that it's a process of that can be taxing for the body and for the emotions, for the personality, even that it's surrendering too much too quick. And so the slow process, the slow unfold, I found really accessible and really gentle and really spoke to me. For me, the process has also been, so I haven't stayed on liquids the entire time since that first process. I I can say that I've stayed on liquids a lot of that time. And my intake has decreased. But the process for me was really a process of integration because of all of those parts of me, the parts that were seeking, the parts that were going through the depression, the parts that were searching. What I noticed was as I went on this journey, the process of doing pranic living incorporates a very, very deep kind of penetration into the mystery of being here as a human being and taking our body on that journey with us and going into some of those primary fears really has a deeply profound effect on our consciousness, so to speak, and our overall journey. I had been practicing breath work and yoga and many other things before pranic living. I was a Tai Chi instructor when I was younger. But pranic living really touches upon a deeply spiritual transition for me, whereby I really touch all of the ways in which I am this human being, this human body, and this human form, and this personality. And also, I'm not. So, letting go, really, what happens when I don't consume food? All of the emotions will arise, all of the fears will arise, and you move through that with some guidance, with a facilitator who really holds space for that. And you witness others doing it, and you learn to trust that there's something beyond this craving, this wanting. There's a deeper state of bliss, a deeper sense of satisfaction. moving through the fear is the initiation, and training the body out of its fear state, even on the autonomic nervous system level. We move more into an equanimous state in our whole being, with our hormones, with our emotions, with our thoughts. We reach a deeper state of clarity about life and a peacefulness within. And although I can say this, I can say at the same time also, there are moments on that journey where I feel crazy. There were moments when I want again, I have to feel that again. So there was a moment where I transitioned. I had been on the journey for a number of years, and I didn't even speak about it to anyone for the first 3 years because it was a deeply personal process for me. And I knew that if I started speaking about it, I would go in the head and it would become a mental thing, and it would become something that, and I would be influenced by others. So I just didn't share with anyone. And for me, there were moments on that journey where I want really strongly. For me, it was a process of allowing that to happen. So of course, I'm going to go back and I'm going to touch food. And what I noticed was the food that I went back to touch on that journey were foods that I hadn't touched for years because I was being healthy and making wise choices from here. But there was a little girl in me that wanted to eat potato chips. Oh, yeah. So I just went and let myself do that. And what I realized on that journey, and without judging myself, without being like, now I'm a failed pranic being, no, that's part of the journey. You're going to go back and you're going to touch food, and you're going to get a more beautiful relationship with consuming, ingesting, and food itself. And there was a little girl in me that wanted to be seen. So I noticed that I was going back and touching things that were from various ages of my life that were happening spontaneously. So I let this phase, this wanting, this craving come, and allow myself to do that and to observe the effect of it. But what I notice is that this is a way for me to bring this little girl with me. So instead of rejecting, it's not a process of rejection and deprivation and denial. It's a process of integration. And so integration of those parts. So that little girl, she's with me, and now she's integrated. And I say, yeah, that's right. You loved that experience, didn't you? And now I've got you. It was kind of like what Brandon was talking about yesterday of the higher self. And we can't reject those parts. Otherwise, she's going to be behind me my whole life, trying to get my attention. And so even with all the other modalities and healing practices I've done and everything, this little girl wants to be integrated on this journey. And it's now about my body and about food and about, we've been talking a lot about addiction and how what we know serves us best, sometimes we don't have the ability to choose that because we're in a state of coping and survival, and we're using these tools, the tool of food, to manage our energy. And so that's actually something that we've used for our benefit. Even becoming ill by consuming things that aren't healthy for us or over consuming works for our benefit. If we notice and take the step to courageously say, oh, I'm ill because of that. What do I want to do? And then we will take actions for that. But we can't take those actions unless we're addressing why. What is the underlying thing that's there for wanting to consume, wanting to cope with our energy, manage our energies this way? So if we want to manage our energies in a way that's more beneficial for ourselves, then we might want to make another choice. So if we go into a state of deprivation and denying ourselves those things, we need another tool. And so pranic living, for some, can be difficult to maintain because the underlying reasons for doing this habit hasn't been addressed. But slowly over time, we dilute it over years and months and years. This experience, we can integrate all of those parts. And then we become more steady on our path. And I think that's where I'm at right now. And I feel deeply blessed to be on this journey. And so I do consume solid food. I do take liquids. I do also for various reasons too, but I think this is where I'm going to wrap it up because I think we have not much time. We have like 2 minutes left. I told my partner, no worries, I can fill an hour easily. So I think we don't have much time for Q&A, but if we want some questions, if you have questions for me, we have a bit of time. Gennaro has the microphone. Oh no, I have the microphone because I presented myself.
Okay, thank you, Morgaine. It's not a question. During your sharing, I was connected by your heart and your energy, and I had a realization. I'm so. I want to share you, if it's okay for you.
Of course, yes, please.
Yes. When I was 15 years old, I wanted to die. Mm-hmm. And often I locked myself in my room without eating for a few days. I and my family believed at that time that it could kill me. During your sharing, I realized that I had saved my life. Since that day, the energy of the food guides me to get here with you. I had many links with food, and today I am going towards a pacification. I understand why I am on a pranic way to live. So thank you so much for that.
Merci beaucoup pour parler en anglais pour moi. Merci. Thank you for that sharing. Yes. I know that I have a comment, which is that, you know, when we're sick, when we're ill physically, we naturally don't want to eat. We naturally stop eating and we rest. Maybe we take some fluids, you know, a bit of broth or a bit of juice or something. this is a natural instinct that we have. So I hear you that your instinct was to stop. And so if your instinct is to stop, that's beautiful, or to slow down. I do want to be cautious about moving into a state of deprivation. So if we're in a state of self-loathing, which I've experienced in my life as well. In fact, I still have a relationship with moments where I feel internal violence, internal state of not fully in a state of self-love. And those moments are teachers for me. And I would just caution everyone that if you are in a state of deprivation and coming from a state of self-loathing or something like this is going on for you, to be very careful with how you're approaching food. Pranic living is there's anorexia nervosa, which is when you fast and you continue to lose body mass until you're gone, basically. So this is an illness, and it's my opinion that it comes from a state of deprivation and depriving oneself, and from a state of self-loathing, from trauma. So anorexia mirabilis is something completely different. So anorexia just means non-eating, like inidia. But mirabilis is where your body mass stabilizes. And I believe that this happens when we are in a state of self-love. And so I think that this pranic process happens where all of the emotions arise, all of the thoughts arise that need to be looked at as to why we are not in this state of self-love. It will all come to the surface to be looked at. And so we have to be gentle with ourselves on that journey to know we're going to be shaken a little bit. We're going to be challenged, but in a way that is walking toward a state of bliss. So whatever is within us, whatever energies that are causing us to do actions that are to cope with our I call it coping, or I call it managing our energies. So sometimes we do need to put something in to numb ourselves so we can manage the intensity. I still do that. Sometimes, when I have a moment where that little girl she's experiencing something, or another part of myself in integration. When I'm in an integration moment, I can feel it. Ooh, something's arising. And I know that I need to take a look at what that is. And now, after years, because I'm familiar with that process, I know that I can touch what that is in a more gentle way and not use these other kinds of tools as much. So slowly over time, we gently arrive to a state of equanimity. But it's a journey. Thank you so much. Oh, so beautiful. If you have other questions for me, I know we're at our time. 5 minutes over. So thank you so much for your time and your attention. We're 5 minutes over the hour now. If you have questions, you're welcome to come and ask me personally in person. And also, I just want to say that may this talk bring only benefit to all beings and all life. And also I dedicate this conversation that we've just had to my son, Abba, whom I miss very much.
And Ava, if you hear this talk, I love you and I miss you. Thank you.